I sat down this evening and wrote this little piece on my computer. It's been a sad day here in Orlando. I'll read the first part of this and then I'll tell you the rest of it. Today is September the 26th, 2016. It was gloomy and rainy most of the afternoon in Orlando. Even the sky was mourning the fact that Arnold Palmer passed away last evening. Thousands of people fortunate enough to meet and know him felt as if they'd lost a family member. From about 8:30 p.m. until 3 a.m., I watched the live broadcast of the Golf Channel tribute, and I've never seen such an outpouring of humility, tears, and love from so many well-known individuals, many of whom possess some pretty good-sized egos. None of that was in evidence when they talked about Arnold. He brought out the best in people because he always gave it himself. I'll tell the rest of this. It was my good fortune to have had the opportunity in 1980 to work on Arnold's golf swing. His father, Deacon, had always been his coach, and Deacon had passed a few years before that, and Arnold was beginning to have some problems with his golf swing. Dow Fensterwall was one of his best friends, and I had worked with Dow a little bit, and Dow set up a lesson with me for Arnold. I met him at Bay Hill, and Arnold and I went to the back of the driving range, spent the whole morning out there, had a wonderful, wonderful time. We started off and Arnold hit a few golf balls, got down to a long iron, took his 2-iron and was actually hooking the ball with his 2-iron into the left rough. He was really having trouble getting the golf ball off the ground. He looked at me and he said, "David, what in the world is going on with me?" He said, "You know how well I've been able to hit a 1-iron all my life." He said, "I don't even have my 1-iron in my bag any longer." And I said, "Well, Arnold, you've hit that age. You just recently turned 50 years old, and your legs are beginning to weaken. You've always put this violent romp on the ball with your shoulders, and your legs were historically have been strong enough to largely negate a lot of the energy that you send back into your body when you tug on it, and you could literally block the hook out of the shot. Now you've gotten older, your legs are starting to weaken a little bit, and when you tie down on it with those muscles, the plane's changing. You're like a machine that has a violent leverage action on it that has been bolted to the floor, and to stop it from walking across the floor, and now your bolts are beginning to come loose. You know, in the case of a machine, if we've got a violent leverage action in the upper part of it, we can do a couple of things. We can either put enough weight in the base of it where the leverage doesn't make it walk, or we can bolt it to the floor. With a human body in a golf swing, we don't have those options. What we have to do there is smooth out the action so that leverage doesn't go back into the body and the swing path integrity is maintained during the delivery. Arnold watched me hit a few golf balls, and he looked at that. He said, "Wow," he said, "I can see the swing that Jack and Lee Trevino used to power the golf ball." He said, "I can see that in you." He said, "I know that's the proper way to hit a golf ball." He said, "How long would it take me to make the swing changes in my own body so that I'm not turning this energy back into myself?" And I said, "Well, Arnold, as violent as you are, and as hard as you hit at it with your shoulders and arms, it probably would take you about 6 months before you could take a new technique into competition. and he just absolutely cratered. He said, "Holy cow, with my schedule, there's no way in the world that I can just drop off the planet for 6 months." He said, "Is there any alternative?" And I said back to him, "There is one alternative. You can go back and get your legs back in condition to where they can support the violence that's going on in your golf swing that's coming from your shoulders and arms, and you can postpone the inevitable." And that was what he chose to do. I think in retrospect, over the last 30 years and what he's seen happen with his golf game, he probably, would have recently thought that 6 months was not very long. He played some pretty good golf as a senior, did win the U.S. Seniors Open, but nothing on the order that he played as a young man. So it was it was kind of sad to me that Arnold chose not to go ahead and make the swing changes, but doesn't diminish the fact whatsoever that he was one of my childhood heroes and still is today. Absolutely love the man. I'll tell you something that was interesting. I saw him a few years after that, one of the last times that he played in his own golf tournament at Bay Hill. I was out on the range at Bay Hill and saw Arnold there, and he turned around and looked at me, and he waved me over there, and I walked over, and he said, "Take a look at this." And he was hitting about an 8-iron, and he drew back and hit the most beautiful little gravity swing you ever saw in your life. No violence, ball just went up and just fell like a feather and just dropped. It was gorgeous. I gave him 2 thumbs up, and I said, "All right, Arnold, you're finally becoming a gravity player." And he looked around to be sure that no one could hear him. He says, "I can't take this blankety-blank golf swing to the golf course to save my soul." He said, "As soon as I get back out there, I want to start attacking again." And I laughed at him. I said, "Well, just keep it up. Maybe you'll get it one of these days while you're still on the green side of the grass." Sadly, he no longer is, but I've seen him a few times over the years. He always remembered me, always was glad to see me almost as much as I was to see him. My son Danny and I were at Augusta about 3 or 4 years ago, and he was coming out of Berkman's Pavilion, and we were going down there. He had about 15 people with him, and I'm walking right down the cart path, and we're headed right for each other. He sees me and stopped, came up, put his arms around me, gave me a big hug, and stopped his whole contingent there while he spoke to me. He gave me a jab. He says, "You must be doing well." He said, "You're certainly dressing better." I laughed and introduced him to Danny. And we talked for a couple of minutes, and he went on. But it's always amazing. It didn't matter what Arnold was doing. When someone came up to him, he would always stop whatever he was into and speak to them and make them feel like they were the only person in the world. And every time I was ever in his presence, he was always that way. He was a great guy. I'm going to miss him dearly, and his presence will always be felt anywhere golf is played. He was the epitome of what a golfer should be. Thank you.